Welcome to Skidompha Library and Chats with Champions. For almost 20 years, Chats has been presenting programs that span the interests of our entire community. Chats is sponsored by Sherman's Maine Coast Bookshop. Today we are pleased to have as our speaker, Ed Rice. Rice is the author of Baseball's First Indian, the story of Penobscot legend Louis Sockalexis. Born in 1871 on Maine's Penobscot Indian Reservation, a nephew of a chief, Louis Sockalexis became professional baseball's first Native American player. Ultimately, his crown on the diamond inspired the name of the Cleveland's baseball team, which was changed in 2021. The book explores the brilliant but too brief major league career of the Deerfoot of the Diamond. It follows Sockalexis' rise to the majors, his fall to the minor leagues of New England, and his final return to the reservation in Maine, where he continued to coach baseball and act as an umpire. Ed's talk today is to raise awareness of Louis Sockalexis Monument Organization, a nonprofit dedicated to building a monument in Maine to honor this athlete. Ed Rice grew up in Bangor, Maine, and has been an arts critic for the Portland Press Herald, Sunday Maine Telegram, Maine Times, and Maine Public Broadcasting System's Maine Things Considered. He has taught journalism and communication studies at several colleges, as well as taught high school English and coached cross country. An avid long-distance runner who has completed 27 marathons, including 8 Boston marathons, Rice created Bangor's popular Terry Fox 5K in 1982 and directed the charity event for over 20 years. He also ran across the state of Massachusetts, 162 miles in 7 days, in support of research to help end ALS. Rice also edited If They Could Only Hear Me, a collection of personal essays about the fight against ALS. In March, Down East Books published his latest book, Robin Emery, 50 Years of Flying Shoes, a biography of one of Maine's pioneer female runners. He lives with his wife, Susan, in St. Andrews, New Brunswick. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Oh my God, you people must be frightened. Some guy is crazy enough to run 27 marathons. I never know what people are going to pick out of my biography to use. This is a real treat for me to have this opportunity. One of the things that I want you to take away from this talk is that I'm not here to sell you books. So my publishers don't ever want to hear me say that. The ones who published the book in the first instance at Tidemark, he took the sentence out that said, I'm not after necessarily making money or expecting to see this on the New York Times bestseller list. What I want to see is the library coding on the spine of this book. Because I know if my mom were alive, that would matter more to her than walking into a bookstore and finding it there. So as a small boy, my mom took me to the Bangor Public Library. And I bet some of you have been in that library, and I bet some of you know where the children's room used to be, because that wonderful facility that's there now, the children's department, that wasn't there back then, was it? No. And that, I'm sorry?
Turn up a bit.
I'm not exactly sure if that's me or you. So, whoa. So that area in the children's department, when I was a tyke, I would be on the floor picking on the titles, picking out baseball books. So, Mom, wherever you are, this one's for you. And it's a library book, so interlibrary loan or however, if they don't have it here, it's in a lot of different places. And the thing that I'll caution you about is it is the most boring book on the planet if you're not a baseball fan. And the reason for that is that in my heart of hearts, the person I was a journalist. And I knew that I had to research this book and put it together like a literary quilt. And I had to keep myself out of it. That's going to be a real key element of this. Because Sock Alexis has been victimized for more than a century by bad journalism. And it started in the 1890s, which is one of the most deplorable eras in American journalism, and I'm sure there are many of you who will say, well, what about right now? I won't get into a discussion with that with you, but I will tell you that the Hearst and the Pulitzer era, the sensationalized headlines, the salacious stories, that was a horrible era. So I needed to piece this together the best I could and keep myself out of it. And I wasn't entirely successful. So I have an essay that opens the book, and I have an essay that closes the book, and you'll find out who I am right in those pages. So it's a library book. I hope that you'll recommend it to people. So what am I going to do today? I'm going to do this in 3 stages. The first stage is going to be the 3 legacies that anyone from Maine and anyone who's interested in this story should be aware of. 3 specific legacies that came from 94 professional baseball games played from 1897 to 1899. 94 games. Now, if you heard this talk back in 2003 when the hardcover book came out, God bless me, but I was just absolutely riveted on these 3 legacies, those 94 games. I'd like to think that I'm coming up on my 75th year. So, yeah, I am that old. And I understand that I got it somewhat wrong, and that I should have been focused more on 19th century values. So you're going to hear a little bit more in the second part about town ball and college baseball as it was played in the 1890s. And you don't have to be a baseball fan to appreciate what I'm going to tell you about. That'll be the second stage. And then I'm going to finish with the story that breaks my heart. And it's something he did on a baseball field in 1899. And I wouldn't have this story if it weren't for the research efforts of a friend of mine going all back to college. His name is Richard Bruce Tarango, known as Dixie. And where did the Dixie come from? His mom and dad were such huge baseball fans, he's named for the Brooklyn Dodgers' Dixie Walker. That's Dix Tarango. And was he satisfied to help me find some of the dates that I couldn't get at the Fogler Library because papers weren't available to me? And so my friend Dix, who lives in the greater Boston area, he got himself into the Lamont Library at Harvard. I still don't want to know how he pulled that off, because you have to have an ID card, and he doesn't have one. But he was getting in, and he was looking up games for me, and he found this story that takes place in Bristol, Connecticut in 1899. And I'll close with that. So let's start with 3 legacies that I'd like you to know. And by the way, there are a whole bunch of Maine journalists that don't get this. And they'll interview me, and they're friends of mine, for God's sakes, and they're still using the word allegedly. Sock Alexis is allegedly the inspiration for the nickname Indians that the Cleveland baseball team used. How many of you think that the word allegedly is appropriate to this? Anybody want to argue with me? Want to start out fighting with the author? Chats with an author, right? Isn't that what this is? Allegedly. And I won't use their names, but they're still saying it. They'll come on the thing, allegedly, that's where they got the nickname. Well, the culprit here, one of them, I'll only use one. And those of you familiar with Don McWilliams, the name Don McWilliams, he was, yeah, some of you are nodding, yeah. He was the sports director for Channel 2, Channel 6 in Portland, Maine for years and years. And he published 2 volumes called Yours in Sports, where he did pieces on great Maine sports figures. And what John McWilliams came up with for Louis Sockalexis was that he had looked up on April 1st of 1897 to discover that the Cleveland team was called the Indians. Therefore, couldn't possibly be the appearance of full-blooded Penobscot Indian Louis Sockalexis that's responsible for the nickname. And many, many people bought into that. Has to be true. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of details. I'm just going to give you the basic skinny. If you're interested, you can look this up. What was going on was that the nickname of the team was the Spiders. And the advent of that had started in 1889. They were the Spiders. And that was because an owner of a team had just bought his new Cleveland players new uniforms. He puts them on them, and he's disappointed. The average height of an American male in the 19th century, anybody want to take a guess? What do we got?
5'8".
Yes.
5'9", 5'8".
Yeah, smaller than that, 5'8", 5'7". They're small, stocky guys more than they're tall, robust, athletic-looking guys. And so he just is so disappointed as he looks at them. He says, they look like a bunch of damn spiders. There's your nickname for the season, boys. Nicknames are capricious things in the 19th century, especially for this advent of professional baseball. The nicknames of the teams come and go. No one's selling you a t-shirt. No one's selling you any gear at all. They can be nicknamed whatever we choose to call them this year. One year, the Brooklyn team had a whole bunch of guys engaged to be married. They're nicknamed the Bridegrooms. Lasted 1 year. They're the Bridegrooms. So these nicknames don't matter. And they're the Spiders until spring training of March 1897, when all of a sudden there's a full-blooded Indian who's going to play professional baseball for the Cleveland team. Brand new nickname. Only, please, the thing that you need to take from this as they start calling them either the Indians or Tebow's Indians, for Patsy Tebow, the playing manager, it's not meant respectfully. The racism of the 1890s in our newspapers in America is flat out horrific and acceptable. It's so bad that when they have a black player on the field, or a red-skinned player on the field, they are absolutely brutal. It is a Jackie Robinson experience for these Indian players attempting to play. It's horrific. So it's not respectful. When we talk about this nickname, we need to understand that as it starts out, it's making fun. It starts in March of 1897. They're playing exhibition games. They call the regular players who were returned from the previous season, they are the Indians. And Sockalexis and the new guys who are coming in to try to take their places, they're the Papooses. Papooses versus the Indians, and it just goes from there all the way through the season. The last thing I will say about legacy number one. No, there's no allegedly here. He is responsible for that nickname flat out. No questions asked. He makes it into a backhanded compliment when he's the most exciting player on the field for the first 3 months. And people are pouring out to see him. And I guess there's a footnote to this. I've said it twice. Full-blooded Penobscot Indian. It was a lie right there. Louis isn't full-blooded. In fact, nobody on the Penobscot Reserve in the early 1850s was full-blooded anymore. Intermarriage, particularly Franco-American, Quebecois. They were coming in, they were on the rivers, and they were intermarrying with the Indians that were there. It's Sake Lexus. It's French, okay? Isn't that interesting? So we've got this story wrong in so many different ways. So I hope you're up there, Sock. I hope I get the interview. I hope you don't punch me on the nose for the stuff you don't like that's in the book. I got questions. I've still got a lot of questions. But the one thing I do know is, absolutely, you were responsible for that name. And when it meant that you were coming in to play Brooklyn, Boston, New York, it meant Sock Alexis is leading not one, not two, but 3 future Hall of Famers that are on that Cleveland team, including the best fielding shortstop, one of the best ones of the 19th century, Bobby Wallace, Jesse the Crab Burkett, called the Crab because he was so argumentative. He was once thrown out of both ends of a doubleheader for arguing with the umpire, but he was a multi-time batting champion. And the third one I know everybody in the room's heard of, and you don't even have to be a baseball fan, and that's Cy Young, pitched for this Cleveland team. Legacy number 1, you bet he's responsible. Legacy number 2, oh, let's get into this. He's the first American Indian to play. This is where I get into a lot of trouble. Because the first thing that I have to do with you is discuss the whole issue of the so-called half-breed. It's a horrible name. It's even horrible if you're that person. If you're that person who has a white and an American Indian, 2 parents, 1 of each, and you're trying to make it through society. And I hope you can see it's fraught with dangers and horrors, because you're not accepted in either world, okay? And there were a couple of the guys that are the American Society for, the Society for American Baseball Research, SABR. They're always trying to take the title away from Sock Alexis of being first. And they're always finding Tommy Orans and Joe Visners and James Madison Toys to say, oh no, he's part Sioux and he's part this and he's part that. And the issue is that places like the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I'm still fighting with them. I've got another trip coming up in August to make the argument you're still not recognizing the pioneer American Indian players and respecting them for what they put up with, because you can't figure out who is and who isn't an American Indian. So it feels like one of those arcane academic arguments, doesn't it? And yet, they've taken the title away from a man who earned it. And so I worked out the language a few years ago with a very kindly man who was the chief of research at the Baseball Hall of Fame and the head librarian. And both of them have since retired, but Jim Gates, the head librarian there, said, Ed, I think you're on to something. I started saying he's the first known Native American to play professional baseball. And that takes us to the 3 litmus test issues that should be in play to determine who is and who isn't. Number 1, you show up in the census in the 19th century if you are an American Indian registered with a tribe. You are on tribal lands. It's not safe for you anywhere else. That's where you are. Number 2, you are registered with that tribe right there. Go on up to Penobscot Indian Island. Go into the St. Mary's Church and you'll see the register, the books of registers. And you look up Louis Sock Alexis's family in the 1880s, 1870s, and you can find it. And you're going to see the list of who the people were. That's 2. In the census, registered with a tribe. And the third one is that they're proud of being an American Indian. There's no history for Tommy Oran or Joe Visner. And oh, by the way, in my book, I really condemn the whole idea about James Madison Toy. And ultimately, in the last few years, it's been proven. The whole family's Irish. They wound up in Beavers Falls, coal country, Pennsylvania, in the mid-19th century. It's an Irish family. There's no Sioux blood there. So the second legacy is first known Native American to play professional baseball, and nobody's going to come and disprove me right now. Where I am going to get in trouble is with those Native people who think you're splitting hairs, 1/16th, 1/32nd, 1/64th. We're getting into blood quantum issues. I'm a white Jewish guy. I used to say I was a white Jewish kid. I don't get away with that anymore. White Jewish guy from Bangor, Maine, and now I'm really on ice that's going to break. Okay, so I need to be really careful about how far I'm going to push this, but what am I fighting for? I'm fighting for Lewis. I'm fighting for the idea of who's going to disprove what was going on in 1897 when this poor guy's trying to play professional baseball games at the highest level there is. That's your number 2 takeaway. He is the first known Native American. Till somebody else can prove those 3 things. Here's the third one, and I've already alluded to it. The reason that there's a monument association that I'm heading up, working with people like John Bear Mitchell, who's been the head of the Native American Studies program at the University of Maine at Orono for years, wonderful man, a very dear friend of mine. David Slager, former representative for the Maliseets. The late Theodore Wayne Mitchell, who I miss dearly because he was just like the godfather, the grandfather at my shoulder, directing me, because he sat right on the island, right in the midst of people saying, why are you working with that Ed Rice guy? And he said, because of what he's trying to do for the legacy. So I'm not here trying to raise money for this statue. I'm here trying to make the point to you about why he deserves the respect that he's still not getting. And maybe I'm still walking around on this earth because I am the one guy trying to do that. What was going on that in the 19th century that means that he's deserving of a third legacy? He's Jackie Robinson 50 years before Jackie Robinson. And just because it's not in the American newspapers, an account after account after account of how horrific his treatment is, doesn't mean that he wasn't being spat at, wasn't being mistreated at every turn. Teammates of his didn't like him. It's the Jackie Robinson story of what Lewis is going through, and still he's persevering and he's going to place after place. So I do believe he's entitled to be recognized. And while Jackie Robinson has plaques in Georgia and California and just about anywhere he ever slept overnight, here in Maine we have one single thing that recognizes Lewis. And you have to go on Penobscot Nation Island and look at that monument that is now his gravesite. And if you know the story behind that, Maine doesn't get any credit for that. Maine doesn't deserve much credit for that. We have the people at Holy Cross College and the Cleveland baseball team that ponied up the money for a newspaper editor, a weekly newspaper editor, and I used to do that myself. His name was Tom Wordsworth, and he created a drive to get the rugged wooden cross replaced with a proper granite monument, and it has crossed baseball bats and a baseball on it. If you've ever been there, I see you nodding your head, sir. Maybe some of the others of you have been on Penobscot Island and seen that. I want to do better than that. I know we can do better than that here in Maine. So those are the 3 legacies, and I would have used up all my time. And you'd be on your way out the door. But I got it wrong. I got it wrong. Because what we need to talk about a little bit is, what is baseball like in the 19th century? Think about that for a second. And are we going to compare it to baseball in the 21st century? Not even close.
No batting gloves.
No batting gloves, yes. No AstroTurf, no designated hitter. Yeah, we got a lot of different things, but what we really have to understand is if I were to ask you, what are the most popular sports in America in 19th century America? You're going to tell me football? You're going to tell me basketball? Good, you're shaking your hands, you know. No. So what's popular?
Golf.
Golf is growing in popularity, but again, you have to have money, don't you?
Tennis.
Tennis, same thing.
Sailing.
Pardon?
Sailing.
Sailing is absolutely possible. Again, what are we talking about? We're talking about moneyed. You have to be moneyed for this. So 2 of these people bet on. They don't really participate as much as they want to go and they want to watch this. Yes, horse racing is one of them, and boxing. And boxing's the other one.
Of course.
Okay, boxing. Okay, so we're not doing that, are we? So what I want you to understand about baseball in the 19th century is it's very, very, very popular with its advent. God only knows where it got started because nobody really knows. Was it in New Jersey? Was it at Cooperstown? Where is this mythical place? Because no one's really got the definitive story for this. But we don't need to worry about that. We know starting in the 1830s, men were playing baseball. And then something started to happen in the early 1870s, right about the time Lewis is being born, that it's gotten so popular that there's actually the attempt at professionals. Some of the guys are so good, but what you need to understand is that is considered a very lowbrow form of entertainment. And the reason is for a lot of specific things that I have in my book. I'll only mention a couple here. Number 1, people are working 6 days a week, and the 7th day, you better not be playing baseball, and you better be in church. And the ministers' associations in many states came down really, really hard at the attempt to play professional baseball on Sundays. In my book, you'll see where Salk and his Cleveland teammates get arrested, and the owner of the team sets them up to be arrested just so he can protest this. There's no way to have an audience for these people, and so consequently, baseball is to be played. We don't care about the professional game. It's to be played. And I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but where is a hotbed of baseball in 19th century America? Well, we're here in Maine in the summer with town ball. And what's going on with town ball is this. Because it's always been that vacation land for people, the best of the college players, and I'm talking the teams in the greater New England area, because that's where baseball is a real hotbed. Big surprise there, huh? Think Red Sox fans a couple centuries ago, but love the game of baseball. Who do they want to see play baseball? They want to see their local heroes who went to college for whatever skill they acquired. They come back to their communities, and now they're on the Auburn side of the Androscoggin, and they're going to play their arch foes in Lewiston. And the Lewiston guys are going to do the same thing. They're going to get their 3 or 4 best players. And maybe it's going to be the town fairs, the country fairs. It's going to be, those of you familiar with the musical Brigadoon, it's just going to come right mythically out of the air, be there for a couple of days. They're going to play their arch foes, and then they're going to go back to working again. Town ball was so huge. The cover of my book, thank God for that photograph. I wouldn't have any picture of what Salk looked like at his absolute athletic best. My poor ex-wife, when she was alive, used to joke, you talk about him like he's a woman. Like, he's just such a gorgeous-looking athlete. But yeah, from the waist up, he's built like a football player. And from the waist down, he's built like a sprinter, like a great runner. I'm convinced of something. I'd like to teach Louis Salk Alexis the 10 different events in the decathlon and put him up against Jim Thorpe. Because I think he's got Thorpe matched for a couple of things, but he's got that upper body strength that Thorpe has too. But he never had the shot at that. So baseball is hugely popular, and those town teams are playing, and the dynamic is this. You're going to do what people have been doing forever. You're looking for the ringer. You're looking for that guy we can bring in, make our team just a little bit better than our foe. And that's why you're going to discover that Louis Salk Alexis played for so many different teams. The Poland Springs team he played for. Hiram Rickers Ricker College team that then turned into a town team up at Ricker College for a while. He played on Squirrel Island. There was a hotbed of baseball just off Booth Bay Harbor. I don't know if people are familiar with that. People have been coming, I was telling this gentleman earlier, people have been coming up to me since my book came out in 2003, the hardcover version, to tell me stories about great uncles or a great grandfather who had played with that Indian baseball player, and they were in awe of him. His skills were beyond belief. So I don't know how many baseball fans I have here. I'm going to tell a couple of baseball stories just so you get the Paul Bunyan-esque feel for this legendary guy. He's playing for Hiram Ricker's team up at Ricker College. And there's a pitcher on that team who's jealous of the attention that the team's getting. And he said, actually, you guys aren't that good. His name was Newenham. This story is in Down East magazine, summer issue, 1956. That's where I got it. First person account from Olin Rideout, who was the catcher on this team, and his brother played first base. So this Newenham guy says, I'm going down to Portland, I'm going to get some players, I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to beat you. So the grudge game is on, and Rideout describes it in detail. And he said, you know, Newenham was a boastful, but he wasn't stupid. And when he came up against us, he knew there was only one guy on our team that could beat him. And so you've already figured out who that is. So now what's he going to do with Sock Alexis? Close. Walk him. Doesn't need to upset him. He can just walk him, right? Put him on first base and then retire everybody else. So according to Mr. Rideout, this went on for 2 trips in a row. And Sock Alexis came back to the bench and he looked at his teammates and he said, if he does that to me again, I will score. So Sock Alexis is what we call today, if you're a big baseball fan like me, a 5-tool baseball player. And that's very rare. In fact, I'm not aware of any others that I've ever read about in the 19th century. 5 tools, who knows what that is? Hits for power, home runs, hits for average. So instead of just 1 for 3 and he's 333, 2 for 5, he's 400. He's a 400 hitter, okay? So he's better. In the field, he's so fast, he can get to anything and make great catches. And then he's got a throwing arm where he can throw the ball, documented throws of over 400 feet. So this is a man who could hit the ball 400 feet, and this is the dead ball era. Dead ball meaning they start playing with the same ball in the first inning, and they're still playing with the same ball at the end of the game. And it's all beaten up, and it's changed shape. It's in tough shape. Dead ball. Okay? And then speed. Now, this is the tricky one. So my students used to come at me all the time. Mr. Rice, this guy's a 5-tool baseball player. Please, give me a break. No, he's not. Roberto Clemente, who was one of my heroes, isn't a 5-tool baseball player. He's close. He's got 4 of them. But he doesn't steal bases. He's fast, but he doesn't steal bases. It's an art for those people who do it. Okay? So now you've figured out the story. He's using that 5th skill, his speed. He gets on first base, and Rideout says he stole 2nd, 3rd, and home on 3 pitches. And Rideout's account in Down East ends with, he came sliding across the plate, slammed into the catcher, separated him from the ball. We won 1-0. Louis Sock Alexis. So town ball, he's going to all these different places. They're paid in this era. You all have seen, or I hope you have, Jim Thorpe has finally been restored to the place that he always should have been. The winner of the decathlon, the winner of the pentathlon, both in the same Olympic Games in 1912. And so we understand that the record keeping, all of this is such a big deal. and that it is important. As I look at Lewis and I see the different things that he was capable of doing, playing town ball and being so successful and being pulled and brought to play on these different teams, they made money. Why did they make money? Doesn't that, they're going to lose their amateur status. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because they're college kids. They're not going to play professional ball afterwards. And go and tell me how Sock Alexis is going to play under an alias. He looks very native and everybody knows who he is. So there are no issues with any of this. No issues at all. He's able to play and play as many times as he wants and collect whatever money people want to give him to play ball. Here's the other side, college baseball. Holy Cross deserves so much credit. I've been honored to speak there twice. The first time I spoke, when Susan and I were down there, they had to move a petition out of the way to let more people in. And I felt so good for him, not for me, for him, that there were so many people that wanted to hear this story. And I said, I have to thank, on behalf of him, Holy Cross. But of course, you people aren't getting that glory, are you? What you need to be thankful for are those people in your past, those Holy Cross men who were here and recognized what they had. Because this is the thing you need to know about Lewis. When he went to Holy Cross College, he only attended this school for 2 years. He's the class of 1897, but he only attended it 2 years. So think about this for a second, and if you've got an individual you can tell me about, I'd love to hear it, because I haven't yet. The first name when Holy Cross created an athletic Hall of Fame in 1956 is Lewis F. Sock Alexis, class of 1897, and he was only there 2 years. That's respect. I told you about how they chipped in a lot of money, and they came up and they were at the dedication of his gravesite. Here's the second thing at Holy Cross. They have, as a lot of colleges do that have a long tradition with their sports, the all-time greatest baseball team at Holy Cross. And Lewis Sock Alexis is on that team. And the next person closest to him, you have to go up to the 1930s and the 40s to find the next person. All the way back to 1897, and then boom, you're all the way here. How did that happen? It's incredible that they would remember it. So the athletic director happened to attend that talk that I gave, and he came up and he said, you know, I'm supposed to be in about 3 different places tonight. We got a track meet going on, a basketball game, all kinds of stuff. I wanted to hear what you had to say. So I smiled my most mischievous smile at him, and I said, you need to do me a favor. And he said, what's that? And I said, that all-time team. Do you know what you're going to need in order to kick Lewis Francis Sock Alexis off that all-time team? Not 1, not 2. You're going to need 3 outfielders, and all 3 of them have to be 5-tool baseball players, or else you can't get rid of him because he's that good. So when Lewis was there, he was the stuff of legends. Briefly told, he did so much property damage at Brown University that they were probably glad that he was gone in 2 years. There was a short porch. Brown sits up on a huge hill in Providence, and if you've ever been there, the residential area is so tight to the university that it's very, very tight quarters. Sock is a left-handed pull hitter, and the left field wall is a whole neighborhood block long, so center field. But just like Fenway Park in Boston, this time not left field, but right field is the one where you've got an intersection in buildings that are just on the other side. So they did try to build something of a wall to try to knock some of the balls down, but that wasn't going to stop Sock Alexis. So he hit a ball through a chapel window one trip, And then get this, a 4th-story dormitory window on another trip in there. There was also the time he stole 6 bases in one game. And that was because of some of the strange the quirkiness of rules in 19th century baseball. You only had so many players. And one of the things that they had to do is if a player was lame and couldn't run, well, if he reaches first base by hit, walk, hit by batsman, however, you can substitute somebody. So Sockalexis was real cagey when he was playing against this one particular team. So he's just lying on the ground looking as lazy as he can. And the captain of the other team says, okay, Curly just reached first base. He needs a substitute runner. We'll pick the Indian guy that's lying there. Big mistake. So he stole 6 bases, 4 running for himself and 2 running for Curly. So there are just, I could tell story after story like that of what he did in college. One more. I said he could throw the ball over 400 feet. Do I have documented evidence? There were several throws. It was a real big deal in the 19th century, the baseball throw. And so they would look at the wind and they talk about wind aided or that sort of thing. So it was a real important element to how far people could throw a baseball. So Sockalexis is playing left field for the Holy Cross team against Harvard, and they're in Cambridge to play this game. There weren't any fences around that field. That was commonplace. And so there's a tennis court behind Sock in left field. It's late in the game, and Holy Cross is only ahead by a couple of runs. Harvard's top power hitter is at the plate, and there are several people that are on base. And he hits the ball completely over Sockalexis' head. And Sock needs to get that ball back in and not let the guy who hit it score. And so he races, winds up on the tennis court, ends up on one of the lines of the tennis court, picks it up and throws it all the way into the pitcher who's standing on the pitcher's mound. And it's not an Ed Rice throw. It's not, oh, how far can I get it out there? It's a dart. It's one of those throws that Dewey Evans, Roberto Clemente, the guys with really powerful arms could make, that you just look at and you can't believe your eyes that you just saw a guy throw a ball like that. 2 professors from Harvard watched the game from the stands and couldn't believe their eyes. They went and got a tape measure. They went out to the field, went to that service box line that Sock had been standing on, and pulled the tape all the way in and discovered it was 409 feet in a fraction of an inch that he had just made just there in the course of the game. Strength of arm, power of hitting. I'll finish with this, the story that Richard Bruce Taranjo told me. So some of you must be sitting there thinking, well, how could he not have been famous? How come I need this old guy to tell me all about this guy? He's not famous. He had a drinking problem. It was exacerbated the further away from the Penobscot Reserve that he got. Some people think it started in Holy Cross. I think it actually started at Notre Dame when he left Holy Cross after 2 years, had a terrible incident out there that's detailed in my book. And it's so bad that when he gets to Cleveland, there's even a clause in his contract that forbade him to drink. 1897 he plays 66 games and then gets hurt, starts drinking. They have to let him go. Only he's able to play 21 games in 1898. In 1899, he's only there for 7 games. He drops down to what was called the New England League. This would have been the top minor league of professional ball. Portland's in it, Hartford's in it, Lewis is in Hartford, and can't make it there. Terrible incidents that I had to include in my book that I found. So he drops down to something called the Connecticut League. And this is some of the smaller towns, and they have their own league. Bristol, Waterbury. He's in Bristol, and it's not working out. He's about to take the train to come back to the Indian Island Reserve. And a gentleman who was in Waterbury. And he was a wonderful hitter and a professional player himself. And he and his brother and his wife have a team in Waterbury. And he beckons him, and he's able to get Sauk Alexis to finish out the season. So the game is in Bristol. And you know where this is all going to lead up. The team is losing by 3 runs to Bristol. And the bases are loaded. And it's late in the game, and there are 2 outs, and Sauk Alexis is up. And for once, this correspondent has set out a lot of information and a description of how the crowd is behaving. And so as Sauk Alexis comes up to bat, the Bristol crowd is absolutely rude beyond belief. And it's all the racial epithets you'd expect, and all the stereotypes and all the worst of it. And it's so bad, according to our correspondent, that Sauk Alexis just steps out of the batter's box to wait for it to end. And this crowd keeps it up. And then finally, it just suddenly stops, as if they just wore themselves out. And so the correspondent writes, a kid with yaller hair. And this always just fascinated me. He didn't write yellow, he wrote yaller. Yellow hair. Pipes up and says, how'd you like to be the Indian? And everybody guffaws in the way that you would expect that, yeah, this is about the worst situation anyone could design for anybody. So you know where this story's going. The pitcher throws him 1 pitch. And Louis Sauk Alexis hit it so far over the center fielder's head that it cleared the bases. Here come all 3 tying runs. And Louis, because of the drinking, isn't that fleet man he has once been, and he only makes it as far as second base. But now he's looking in at those bleachers of those people who've been so cruel and so mean. And what are they doing? Well, they're stunned. They've just seen something that has absolutely taken their breath away, and they don't have anything really to say about it. And that's when the kid with the yellow hair has the punctuating line. Thank you, Richard Taranto, for finding this story. And he simply says what he already has said. How'd you like to be the Indian? Only this time he means it as reverentially as he can say it. And everybody applauds him. Louis Sauk Alexis, you've been wonderful. Thank you. I'll take questions or comments. Or...
Are there any other Maine Native Americans who made it to big-time baseball?
Boy, there's the Sauk Basin cousins who are in the Maine Baseball Hall of Fame. And they would have played town ball, they would have played that. In terms of, with an Indian background, no. If we're talking a Major League Baseball, no.
Sauk Basin came from Knox County, didn't he?
He may have. Yeah. But he played a lot of baseball up in the area that I'm living in now, up on the Passamaquoddy Bay, because the 2 Passamaquoddy reserves are up there, Indian Township and Sapayak. And then on my side, I'm really close friends with the Passamaquoddy chief on the New Brunswick side, and he's going to have me in to talk because he says the familiarity with the Sauk Basin cousins is so great that they probably enjoyed this. I really should tell you one quick thing. Sauk's responsible for another thing you should keep in mind. If I was to say, can you name me a legendary fictional baseball player who was successful? I don't want to hear about Casey at the bat. I know all about him. He wasn't successful. Name me the successful fictional player. And you're probably going to have trouble because as a kid I read these stories, but there wasn't one there that stuck out. His name is Frank Merriwell. And Frank Merriwell played for, allegedly, in these stories, Yale. Why? Because college baseball, as I tried to tell you earlier, is far more popular, town ball and college ball, with these guys who were so successful baseball players in the 19th century. A gentleman named Gilbert Patton from Corinth, Maine, started to write baseball stories for boys' magazines. Literacy was really improving in the 1880s and 1890s, and now we had the kind of publications that people besides newspapers would read. And Gilbert Patton was also a baseball manager in the Knox County League, and that's why I was thinking about this. Sock Alexis played for Warren. That's where he met the Holy Cross guys, or maybe in Poland Springs, who knows, but he met them in this circuit. Mike Power, Walter Curley, who I mentioned earlier, they're all playing baseball summers for these teams. Gilbert Patton is getting tired of watching his team lose to Sock Alexis because he hit a home run, or he made a great catch, or he stole the base, or he threw the ball 400 feet. I mean, he's just losing in all these different ways. So he starts writing this story about a white, Christian young man of wonderful values who's going to go on to be a doctor or a lawyer or God knows what. And he wins baseball games in all these different ways. And so Grantland Rice and a couple of the other writers of the period took note that there was a character in these stories who Frank Merriwell is sweet to, and he's kind to him in ways, who is an American Indian who just is on the team as well. And that's supposed to be the nod, the literary nod to, yeah, I've taken Sock Alexis's story, but you can't make your hero an American Indian in for these magazine stories. He's got to be white, Christian, playing for Yale in order to be successful. And this is indisputable now, that Louis Sock Alexis was the pattern for Frank Merriwell, the great fictional baseball player. Sure.
So a couple of years ago, 1989, I guess, I was researching a book, a backwards travel guide to Maine. I went to Indian Island.
Mm-hmm.
I was really looking for Joe Polis's Thoreau's guide when he was here on one of his trips. But I also, being a baseball fan, I was looking for Sock Alexis. And I was talking to the man who was tending the cemetery, right? And he said, oh yeah, I know where he is. You know, he takes me to him, he said, and he raised his hand over, he said, he visited me last night. But it was great to see, you know, it was great to be on the island, it was great to see the marker.
It is. I go there and apologize to him. I feel like I haven't done enough. I haven't come up with the magic thing. Politics with our tribes is, well, you know, those of you who have lived in this state.
Recent.
It just gets worse and worse. You use my name on Penobscot Nation Island, you're either going to hear, wow, what a wonderful thing he did, or words you don't want to listen to. So I'm the white guy who's getting rich. I love this one. That's my favorite narrative. I came and took the story, and somehow or other, I'm somehow, you know, doing something.
Do you get other, you know, feed? This is a question without an embedded judgment.
Okay.
But in this period where there's so much pushback for people of one tribe writing about people of another tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So people writing about African Americans, men writing about women.
Yes.
You know, in your case, a Jewish American writing about a Native American.
Exactly.
So have you had, you know, this is more of a debate or discussion that takes place in the airy atmosphere of academia. Have you had that kind of, you know, pushback?
Yeah, I have, and I'm not going to speak publicly about it, but just understand that I had a talk that was supposed to be in Skowhegan a couple of weeks ago. I was really looking forward to it, and the family stopped it.
On those great,
Just,
on that basis.
I'm the white guy who came along and took the story. Sir?
You mentioned Tip Thorpe, so you know that story in this town named after. So two quick things. One, where is Indian Island? And secondly, have you thought that someplace different might serve as a more popular?
Yes. Thank you for bringing that, because now I'm going to invoke my dear friend Theodore Wayne Bear Mitchell, who was the last legislator from the Penobscot Reserve to the Maine state legislature. This is a man of stature and a man of courage. The first question is, for those of you not familiar with the Indian Reserve, is, so think Bangor, Maine, go up the Penobscot 13 miles, and you're going to find an island right smack in the middle of the Penobscot River, just opposite Old Town. So right opposite the mill. My dad was the chief financial officer for that old Penobscot shoe company back in the day, and a lot of Indians worked in that particular mill. So it is right there. It used to be that Sauk, Alexis, and others rode a ferry before there was a bridge. Then there was a bridge, and it was only a one-lane bridge, so you had to figure out who's coming, who's going. There is now a two-lane bridge, and you're free to go across there and visit that particular cemetery. The second question, I forgot.
The idea, was there, depending on where this was, is there more central?
Yes, thank you. I was going to talk about what, Wayne said to me, and this is part of what's not playing real well with some of the people on the island. The island has decided that we should raise all the money, give them our money, and they'll build a statue and we can go away. That this goes through the council has nothing to do with us. And one of the earliest meetings that I had with Wayne, he said, that's not the place for the statue. It's on the Capitol grounds, Ed. It's on the Capitol grounds. You know how many the school groups come in every single day, all the people that come in, they wouldn't have to travel all the way up here. That's where the statue should be. John Bear Mitchell, David Slager, and Ed Rice, and the four of us. And so we're already at odds with the present tribal chief and that council, because they've already picked the spot where the statue should go, and they're saying we shouldn't go any further than that. So, one of the things I didn't mention, I should in passing, I also did a book on his cousin, Andrew Sauk Alexis. He's buried just a few feet away from where Lewis is. He was the fourth finisher in the Olympic marathon in 1912. That Jim Thorpe Olympic Games, there were actually 3 indigenous peoples there. And the second one is Louis T. Manema, a Hopi from the Arizona area. And he actually got a silver medal in the 10,000 meter run. So you had 3 incredible performances there. And Andrew was second in the Boston Marathon in 1912, second in the Boston Marathon in 1913, fourth in the Olympic Marathon. He contracted TB just a couple years later, and he was gone. I got teased unmercifully by my running friends when the Lewis book came out. Ed, you're a marathoner. How could you do this to us? Forget the baseball player, do the marathon runner. I did the marathon runner, and that book is available, and I really owe Michael Steer and Down East Books for bringing both of them back. So actually, while this pandemic has been going on, Michael Steer brought back the Lewis book in a paperback with new information, and he brought out the self-published Andrew book, which I thought was just going to be in a couple of libraries, and that'd be the end of it. But God bless Michael Steer and Down East Books. So I should just mention parenthetically. Anybody else?
Do you have the French genealogy of Sauk Alexis' family?
I don't. There is in the Andrew book a family tree, and you can see the spelling of the name, and it's really interesting because in the early days they were trying to spell it out phonetically, so Soccalexis. I mean, various spellings. And when you look up some of the grave sites in that in that cemetery there, you'll see the different spellings if you go way back for the ones that are on the old wooden crosses.
So I'm thinking, though, that Old Town is a mill town. Follow all the mill towns down to the, Brunswick, say, or even further down to Saco, Biddeford.
Wouldn't surprise me.
The laborers were all Quebecois, all virtually all, right? The Acadians stayed where they were.
Yep.
So there's a Quebecois that came down.
Yes.
So it would have been possibly somebody who was a mill worker and who intermarried with the...
Exactly. So the real problem, as you can all see, we know it's an oral tradition that we're dealing with. and they don't keep written records. And so some of the trouble that I'm running into here is, Ed, we have a different story of this, and you're not respecting our oral tradition by trying to pin things down. So there are some things I've let go. I didn't try to go any further than the genealogy that I was presented, which is complete. And why do I know that? Here's the last thing I want to tell you about this subject, and then that's over. You're going to see the name Sokolexis occasionally carried by somebody who's going to present that name in the media. Any number of newspapers and TV people go looking for Chris Sokolexis and Nathan Sokolexis. This family, up until 1993, was named Renko. And they are claiming that one of their descendants had an illegitimate child, and they are directly connected to Louis Sokolexis. The last person on the genealogy that Glenn Starr had that was born and had the name Sokolexis, his name was Louis Edward Sokolexis, and he died in 1987. He was a World War II vet. He didn't have really any information when I interviewed him, and he just appreciated the great athletes that he was directly related to. He's the last individual with the name Sokolexis. And I just hope one of these days somebody brave enough in the Maine media will look into this story a little further. The one thing I know, you don't have to take my word for any of this. What have I done? You've got my book. Everything that I told you today is in that book. And that's what follows me when I'm not here and I'm not able to talk about Louis any further. Yeah, our big hope is that we're able to find some people that will come up with some money. Cleveland baseball team came up with a stipend for us, so that's part of the fund, and we're still trying to raise money. If you're interested, there's a little sheet that I had put out. I don't know if you've still got it, Karen, but I can send you another copy of it, and it gives all the basic information. I've got cards if anyone's interested. But at any rate, I don't know if we're going to be able to build the statue. Politics being what they are among our indigenous peoples, about the people that are in our legislature now aren't the same people that Wayne Mitchell, Job Mitchell, David Slager, and Ed Rice felt we could work with. So it may be one of those hopes that doesn't get realized. Thank you so much, really.
Thank you so much. Thank you.